The rain was hitting the window so hard that night, it sounded like someone throwing stones at the glass. He was sitting at his desk, trying to finish some work before midnight. The apartment was quiet except for the storm outside and the soft hum of his laptop. He lived alone on the third floor of an old building, and most nights were just like this one. Peaceful. Predictable. Then came the banging on his door. Not a knock. Not a gentle tap. This was desperate, urgent, pounding that made his heart jump. He looked at the clock. It was almost 11 at night. Who would be at his door at this hour? The banging continued, louder now, more frantic. He got up slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe there was a fire in the building. Maybe someone needed help. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing there was his neighbor from down the hall. The woman he'd seen a few times in the elevator but never really talked to. Her hair was wet from the rain, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. He opened the door quickly. She practically fell into his apartment, breathing hard, looking over her shoulder like something was chasing her. Water dripped from her clothes onto his floor. She was shaking. Not from the cold, but from something else entirely. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, you have to help me. I don't know what to do." I didn't know where else to go. He stepped back, confused and concerned. "What happened? Are you okay? Do you need me to call the police?" She shook her head quickly, then nodded, then shook her head again. She couldn't seem to decide. Her hands were trembling as she pushed her wet hair back from her face. "I don't know. Maybe. I think someone's been in my apartment." That got his attention immediately. "What do you mean someone's been in your apartment?" She walked further into his living room, still looking back at the door like she expected someone to burst through it any second. "I came home from work late. The door was unlocked. I always lock my door, always. But tonight it was open, just a little bit. And when I went inside, things were different. Moved. Not in obvious ways, but I could tell. My drawers had been opened. My closet looked disturbed. Someone went through my things." He felt a chill run down his spine. They lived in a safe neighborhood, or at least he thought they did. "Did you see anyone? Did they take anything?" "That's the thing," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "Nothing's missing. At least nothing I can find. That's what makes it so creepy. Why would someone break in and not steal anything? What were they looking for?" He didn't have an answer for that. It was strange. Most break-ins were about grabbing valuables and getting out fast. This sounded different. More personal. More threatening. "You should definitely call the police," he said, reaching for his phone. "Let me help you. They need to know about this." She looked at him with grateful eyes, and for the first time since she'd crashed into his apartment, she seemed to relax just a tiny bit. "Thank you. I'm sorry for barging in like this. I know we don't really know each other, but I was so scared. And I saw your light was on, and it's okay," he said gently. "You did the right thing. You shouldn't be alone right now. If someone broke into your place." As he dialed for the police, he noticed her looking around his apartment nervously. She kept glancing at the window, at the door, like she was watching for something, or someone. The storm outside seemed to be getting worse. The wind howling through the streets below. The operator answered, and he explained the situation. They said they'd send someone over right away. But with the storm, it might take 20 minutes or so. He thanked them and hung up. "They're coming," he told her. "You can wait here until they arrive. Do you want some water? Or tea? You're soaking wet." Saida. She nodded slowly. "Tea would be nice. Thank you." He went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, but his mind was spinning. Something about this whole situation felt off. Not her story necessarily, but the timing. The way she'd appeared at his door, and the look in her eyes wasn't just fear. There was something else there too. Something she wasn't telling him yet. He made 2 cups of tea while she stood in his living room, still dripping water onto the floor but seeming too distracted to notice or care. When he handed her the warm cup, her hands were still shaking slightly. She wrapped both palms around it like she was trying to absorb all the heat she could. "I'm sorry about your floor," she said quietly, looking down at the puddle forming around her shoes. "Don't worry about it," he said. "That's not important right now. What's important is that you're safe." She took a sip of the tea and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, she looked at him directly. "I should tell you something. This isn't the first strange thing that's happened." He felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" She walked over to his couch and sat down, still holding the teacup like it was a lifeline. "For the past 2 weeks, I've had this feeling. Like someone's been watching me. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds paranoid. But I've noticed little things, a car that seems to be parked on our street at odd hours. The same person behind me at the grocery store twice in 1 week. Phone calls where no one speaks when I answer." This was getting more serious by the minute. "Have you told anyone about this? Friends? Family?" She shook her head. "I live alone. My family's in another city. And my friends. I didn't want them to think I was crazy. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was stressed from work and seeing patterns that weren't there. But tonight, when I saw my apartment had been entered, I knew I wasn't imagining anything." He sat down in the chair across from her, trying to process everything. "Do you have any idea who might be doing this? An ex-boyfriend? Someone from work? Anyone who might have a reason to?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out," she interrupted. "I broke up with someone about 3 months ago. But it was mutual. We barely even talk anymore. There's no one at work who would do something like this. I keep my life pretty simple. I go to work. I come home. I mind my own business." The wind rattled his windows, and they both jumped slightly. The storm was really picking up now. He checked his phone to see if the police had sent any updates. But there was nothing yet. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Of course. Have you noticed anything strange in the building? Anyone hanging around who shouldn't be here? Any weird sounds or activity?" He thought about it carefully. "Not really. I work from home most days, so I'm here a lot. The building's pretty quiet. Mostly older residents who keep to themselves. There's the building manager who comes around sometimes. But he's been here for years." "Why?" She bit her lip, like she was deciding whether to say something. "Because whoever went through my apartment had to get into the building somehow. Either they have a key, or someone let them in, or they found another way inside. And that means they might still be close." That thought hadn't occurred to him, and it sent a cold feeling through his chest. His apartment was just down the hall from hers. If someone was targeting her, they'd walked past his door, maybe multiple times. "When the police get here," he said, "we should ask them to check the whole building. The security cameras too, if they're working." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The cameras in this building haven't worked in months. The landlord keeps saying he'll fix them. But he never does." "Of course. That would have been too easy." They sat in silence for a moment, just listening to the storm and waiting for the sound of sirens. He studied her face, noticing things he'd never paid attention to before during their brief encounters in the hallway. She had worry lines between her eyebrows, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping well. This situation had clearly been weighing on her for longer than just tonight. "I never even introduced myself properly," she said with a weak smile. "We've lived on the same floor for almost a year, and I don't even know your name." He smiled back. "Better late than never, right?" They exchanged names and a little background. She worked as a graphic designer for a small company downtown. He was a freelance writer, which explained why he was always home. They talked about the building, the neighborhood. Ordinary things that felt comforting in the middle of this strange and frightening situation. Then his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. He frowned and opened it. His blood went cold. The message was simple, just 5 words. But they changed everything. "You shouldn't have let her in." He stared at the screen, reading it again and again, hoping he'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding those words. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the expression on his face. He turned the phone around slowly so she could see the message. Her face went pale. "Oh my God. They're watching us right now. They know I'm here." The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. He jumped up and went to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to look outside. The street below was dark and empty, rain pouring down in sheets. A few parked cars lined the curb, but he couldn't see inside any of them. Anyone could be out there, watching. "Get away from the window," she said urgently, and he stepped back quickly. His mind was racing. Someone had his phone number. Someone knew she was in his apartment. Someone was watching them right now, at this very moment. He felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he'd never felt in his own home before. "We need to call the police back," he said, picking up his phone again. "This is beyond a break-in now. This is stalking, harassment, threats." But before he could dial, another text came through. Same unknown number. "The police can't help you. I'm always closer than you think." She saw it over his shoulder and gasped. "This is insane. Who does this? What do they want?" He was about to answer when they both heard it. A sound from the hallway outside his apartment. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps walking past his door. Then stopping. Right outside, they froze, staring at the door. Neither of them breathed. The footsteps started again. Moving away now. Heading toward the stairwell, at the end of the hall. A door opened and closed. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He nodded. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Stay here. Don't move." "What are you doing?" she asked as he moved toward the door. "I'm going to look." "Are you crazy? Don't go out there." But he had to know. He couldn't just sit in his apartment wondering who was out there, what they wanted, how much danger they were really in. He moved quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The lights flickered slightly, the way they sometimes did during storms. Everything looked normal. But normal didn't feel safe anymore. He unlocked the door as quietly as he could and opened it just a crack, peering out. Still nothing. The hallway was silent except for the sound of the storm outside and the old building settling. He was about to close the door when he noticed something. Her apartment door, down the hall. It was open. Just slightly. Maybe an inch or two. But definitely open. "Your door," he said, turning back to her. "It's open." She came over and looked for herself. "I closed it when I left." "I know I did. I checked it twice before I came to your place. Someone had opened it, recently, maybe just moments ago. Maybe whoever had been walking in the hallway." His phone buzzed again. Another message. "Go back inside. Lock your door. Pretend tonight never happened. Or things get worse for both of you." This was a warning. A clear threat. Whoever this person was, they wanted her isolated. They wanted her alone and scared. And now that she'd come to him for help, he was part of this too. "We're not doing what they say," he said firmly. "We're staying together, and we're waiting for the police." She looked terrified but nodded. Okay, you're right." He closed his door and locked it, then pushed a chair against it for good measure. It wouldn't stop a determined person, but it might slow them down. Buy them a few seconds if they needed it. They moved away from the door, back to the center of the living room. The storm outside was reaching its peak now. Thunder rolling across the sky. Lightning illuminating the room in brief, harsh flashes. "I need to tell you something else," she said quietly. "Something I should have mentioned earlier." He looked at her, waiting. "About 3 weeks ago, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a photo of me, just me, walking down the street near my office. And on the back, someone had written, 'I see you.' I threw it away. I thought it was some sick prank. But now it was clear this had been building for weeks. This wasn't random. This was planned, deliberate, personal." "Why didn't you go to the police then?" he asked. Because I was scared they wouldn't believe me. One photo? They'd probably tell me it was nothing, that I was overreacting. I wanted more proof, and I was hoping it would just stop, but it hadn't stopped. It had escalated. Another sound from the hallway. This time it was different. Not footsteps. It was a scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. Then silence again. They looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Where were the police? It had been almost 30 minutes since he'd called. They should be here by now. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no messages from the police, just those threatening texts from the unknown number. Then, finally, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize, but not the same one that had been texting him. He answered carefully. Hello? This is Officer Chen from the precinct. We received a call about a break-in at your address. We're trying to get there, but the storm has caused several accidents and we're delayed. Can you confirm everyone is safe? Relief washed over him. Yes. We're okay. We're locked inside my apartment. But there's more going on than just a break-in. Someone's been sending threatening messages, and they're in the building right now. There was a pause. Sir, stay where you are. Keep your door locked. We're sending units now as priority. Should be there in less than 10 minutes. Do not open your door for anyone except police. We'll announce ourselves clearly. Understood. Thank you. He hung up and told her what the officer had said. 10 more minutes. They could handle 10 more minutes. But then all the lights went out. The darkness was complete and sudden. One moment the apartment was lit with warm yellow light, and the next they were plunged into absolute blackness. The only illumination came from the occasional flash of lightning through the windows, brief moments where they could see each other's frightened faces before darkness swallowed them again. Is it just your apartment? She whispered. He moved carefully to the window and looked out. The entire street was dark. Whole neighborhood. The storm must have taken down a power line. Thanks for watching. His phone's flashlight was their only steady source of light now. He turned it on, and the small beam cut through the darkness, casting strange shadows on the walls. The apartment felt different in the dark, unfamiliar, threatening. The police said 10 minutes, she said, her voice shaking. We just have to wait 10 minutes. But 10 minutes in the dark, knowing someone was out there, felt like an eternity. They heard it again. That scraping sound in the hallway. Closer now. Right outside his door. Then a soft knock. Not the desperate pounding from earlier when she'd first arrived. This was gentle, almost polite. 3 soft taps. They didn't move. They barely breathed. Another 3 taps. Then a voice. Low, muffled through the door. I know you're both in there. We need to talk. It was a man's voice. Calm. Too calm. There was something wrong about how casual it sounded. Like they were neighbors chatting about the weather instead of this nightmare situation. Don't answer, she whispered, gripping his arm. He had no intention of answering. They stood frozen in his living room, the phone's flashlight pointed at the door, watching for any sign it might open. I'm not going to hurt anyone, the voice continued. I just want to explain. You don't understand the whole situation. If you'd just open the door, we could talk about this like reasonable people. The way he spoke was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been yelling or threatening. The calmness suggested someone who was completely in control, someone who'd thought this through carefully. The police are on their way, he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. They'll be here any minute. A soft laugh from the other side of the door. Will they? In this storm? With all the accidents and emergencies happening? I think we have more time than you realize. His hand tightened around the phone. The man was right. In conditions like this, 10 minutes could easily become 20. Or 30. How long could they hold out? What do you want? She called out suddenly, her voice stronger than he expected. Why are you doing this to me? There was a pause. Then, because you took something from me. Maybe you don't even remember. But I remember. And now it's time to make things right. She looked at him, confused and frightened. "I don't know what he's talking about. I've never done anything to anyone. I don't even know who he is." The doorknob turned. Not forcefully, just a gentle test to see if it was locked. It was, but the chair he'd pushed against it seemed like such a flimsy defense now. "Last chance," the voice said. "Open the door voluntarily, or I open it myself. Either way, we're having this conversation tonight." He looked around desperately for something. Anything they could use to defend themselves. A lamp. A heavy book. His laptop. Nothing felt adequate against an unknown threat. Then he remembered. The fire escape. His apartment had a window that led to the building's old fire escape. It was rusty, and he'd never used it. But it was there. "Come on," he whispered to her, grabbing her hand. "This way." They moved quickly toward his bedroom, where the fire escape window was located. Behind them, they heard a harder impact against the door. He was trying to force it open. The bedroom was pitch black. He fumbled with the window lock, his hands shaking. It was old and stiff. Hadn't been opened in years. Another impact from the front door, louder this time. The chair scraped against the floor. "Hurry," she urged. Finally, the lock gave way. He pushed the window up, and cold rain blew into the room. The fire escape was slick and wet, the metal freezing to the touch. Lightning flashed, showing them the precarious platform 3 stories above the street. "We have to climb down," he said. She looked terrified but nodded. Okay. Let's go." From the living room came the sound of splintering wood. The door was giving way. She climbed out first, her hands gripping the wet metal railings. He followed, pulling the window partially closed behind them. The rain was coming down so hard they could barely see. The metal stairs were slippery and treacherous. They started down carefully, one step at a time. Below them, the street was still dark and empty. No police yet. No help in sight. They were halfway to the second-floor landing when they heard his bedroom window slide open above them. A flashlight beam swept across the fire escape. "There's nowhere to go," the voice called down. "This fire escape only goes down. And I'll be right behind you." They moved faster, too fast, feet slipping on wet metal. She nearly lost her balance, and he caught her just in time. His heart was hammering. They reached the second-floor landing and kept going down to the first. Above them, they could hear footsteps on the metal stairs. He was following, taking his time, confident they couldn't escape. When they reached the bottom, there was still a 10-foot drop to the ground. The ladder that was supposed to extend down was rusted in place, wouldn't budge. "Jump," he said. "I'll go first." He didn't give himself time to think about it. He just dropped, landing hard on the wet pavement, pain shooting through his ankle. But he was down. "Come on," he called up to her. She hesitated only a second, then jumped. He caught her, breaking her fall, and they both tumbled to the ground. The flashlight beam found them from above. "Running just makes this harder," the voice called down. They scrambled to their feet and ran, limping through the rain-soaked street. His ankles screamed with pain, but adrenaline kept him moving. They had to find somewhere safe, somewhere public, somewhere with people. Behind them, they heard the sound of someone landing on the pavement. He was on the ground now, too. Following them into the storm, they ran through the dark streets, the rain pounding against their faces, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Every car parked along the curb could be hiding someone. Every alley they passed could be a trap. His ankle throbbed with each step, but fear kept him moving. "There," she gasped, pointing ahead. "The convenience store. It's still open." A small light glowed in the distance, the only lit building on the entire block. It must have had a generator. They pushed themselves harder, splashing through puddles, their clothes completely soaked. They burst through the door of the store, setting off the entrance bell. An elderly man behind the counter looked up, startled by their dramatic entrance and their panicked expressions. "Please," she said breathlessly. "Someone's following us. We need help. We need to call the police." The old man's eyes widened, and he immediately reached for the phone behind the counter. "What's happening? Are you hurt?" Before they could answer, the door opened behind them. They spun around, ready to face their pursuer, but it wasn't him. It was a police officer, in a rain-soaked uniform, hand on his holster, eyes scanning the situation quickly. "Are you the ones who called about a break-in?" the officer asked. Relief flooded through them like a wave. Yes. Yes. That's us. There's a man. He's been threatening us. He broke into her apartment. He chased us down the fire escape." "Slow down," the officer said, holding up a hand. "You're safe now. My partner's checking your building. We need to get your statements." Another officer appeared at the door, shaking rain from her jacket. "Building's clear. Checked every floor. No signs of forced entry except apartment 3F, and the front door to 3B was damaged recently. Looks like someone tried to break in his apartment." The man had broken through his door after they'd escaped. Over the next hour, more police arrived. They gave their statements, showed the threatening text messages, explained everything that had happened. The officers took it seriously, calling in detectives, securing the building, checking security footage from nearby businesses. "We found something interesting," one of the detectives said, approaching them as they sat wrapped in blankets the convenience store owner had provided. "Your building's security cameras might not work, but the restaurant across the street has cameras. We pulled their footage from tonight." He showed them a tablet with grainy security footage. A figure in dark clothing, face partially obscured, entering their building around 9 o'clock. The timestamp was about an hour before she'd knocked on his door. "We're running facial recognition now," the detective continued. "And we found fingerprints in both apartments. We'll know who this person is soon." She leaned against him, exhausted and shaken. "I don't understand why. Why me? What did I supposedly take from him?" The detective's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression changed. "We have an ID. You're going to want to hear this." They waited as she pulled up information on her tablet. "Does the name David Choi mean anything to you?" She frowned, thinking, "David Choi? Wait. Yes. He worked at my company about 6 months ago. He was let go. But I had nothing to do with that. I barely knew him. According to our records, you were one of the people interviewed during the investigation into his conduct," the detective said. "Your statement helped confirm that he'd been violating company policies." Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God. There was an incident. He made some of the staff uncomfortable with his behavior. HR interviewed several of us. I just told them the truth about what I'd witnessed. I never imagined he'd. People sometimes fixate on those they blame for their problems," the detective explained. "We've put out an alert for him. With the evidence we have, the texts, the break-in, the threats, he'll be charged with multiple crimes. You'll both need to be careful until we have him in custody. But you did everything right tonight." As dawn began to break and the storm finally started to clear, they sat in the police station giving final statements. The terror of the night was beginning to fade, replaced by exhaustion and the strange bond that forms between people who survive something traumatic together. "Thank you," she said quietly, as they waited for a police escort back to collect some belongings from their apartments. "If I hadn't knocked on your door, if you hadn't let me in, you'd have figured something out," he said. "You're stronger than you think." She smiled weakly. "We both are, apparently." 2 days later, the police called. They'd arrested David Choi, trying to leave the state. He'd confessed to everything, claiming she'd ruined his life and he wanted to scare her, make her understand what she'd done. The delusions of someone who couldn't accept responsibility for his own actions. The building manager finally fixed the security cameras. She decided to move to a different apartment, somewhere with better security. But before she left, she stopped by to thank him again. "I keep thinking about that night," she said. "How scared I was. But also how you helped me without hesitation. You didn't have to open your door. You didn't have to let a near stranger into your home." "Yes, I did," he said simply. "It was the right thing to do." They stayed in touch after she moved. Coffee sometimes, checking in to make sure each other was okay. The trauma of that night slowly faded, replaced by something unexpected. A friendship, trust, understanding. Sometimes the worst nights lead to the most important connections. Sometimes danger brings out the best in people. And sometimes, opening your door to someone who needs help, even when it's risky, is exactly what both of you needed. The city returned to normal. The storms passed. Life continued, but neither of them forgot that night. Or the reminder that in moments of crisis, there are still people who choose kindness over fear, help over indifference, and doing what's right even when it's difficult. That's the kind of story worth telling. Not about fear, but about courage. Not about violence, but about protection. Not about isolation, but about human connection when it matters most.